Hey everybody, I wanted to give you an update as of July 2025. I did an update video last month. In that video, I mentioned two different circumstances in my life that have made the past 9 months incredibly difficult. And now I can tell that story. I've discovered for me that my story, what has happened to me, what I've experienced, gone through my life is very important to me, very sacred to me. And telling my story is kind of a way of like taking ownership of my life. And so telling my own story has become deeply important to my own spiritual growth and my own spiritual journey. Um, and this one's a little bit different because it's not just about me. It involves other people. So you kind of have to wait till it feels okay for other people for you to share their story. And part of this involves my wife's journey. And she is an introvert like myself, whereas I'm more of a public introvert. She's more of a private introvert. And if you're not sure what an introvert means, it's where we get our energy. I love people, but they wear me out. I get my energy from solitude and time alone. Encourage you to read the book Quiet if you think you may be in relationship with an introvert. Really helpful book to me to read that. And if you want to understand me better, read the book Quiet. But like I said, this story involves not just me, but some other people. And again, I'm not trying to teach a history lesson here, just give the overview of what I've been through. So a little bit of context before we start the story 9 months ago on October 23rd. When I first started dating my wife, our first date was September 13th, 2017, and we've been together ever since then. So fall of 2017 is when we began hanging out together quite a bit. And at that time, her mom, my mother-in-law now, but at the time, my mother-in-law was, it was my girlfriend's mom. She lived in the Tacoma area. And a couple of years ago, she moved from the Tacoma area down to live near us, just 2 exits away from us. And we would see her occasionally, have dinner, and she'd go out and about and have adventures, and everything was great. And then roughly January 2024, she went into hospice. She'd gotten older, and hospice is an incredible thing. If you're around someone that's dying, and maybe you hear hospice, if you can get someone into hospice, it's absolutely phenomenal. You get access to really good medical care. The doctors and medicine comes to you now. You don't have to go out to the doctor's office. You get a lot of comfort medicine. You get a lot of social work for yourself, for the person in hospice, for the family. There's a lot of great benefits to hospice, but she went into hospice, and that was kind of sobering. It's like, wow, she's in hospice, so she's not going to be with us much longer. So we started a tradition, martinis with mom. And so on Monday nights, often, not every Monday night, but often on Monday nights, sometimes other days of the week, we would go the 2 exits down the freeway, and we would go to her house, my wife and I, and have dinner with my mother-in-law. And she loved martinis. My wife would make dinner. I'd make her a martini. We'd put on Frank Sinatra, and we just, developed. I came pretty close to her during that time that we did that on a regular basis. All right. So she was on hospice for quite a while, for quite a long time. And some people on hospice generally, I think if you Google it, it's like 3 to 6 months, but some people be on hospice for as much as 18 months. The thing about hospice is you have to qualify. So about every 6 months, they're like, okay, are you really, really dying? And if you are, then you stay on hospice. And so this whole time that she was in hospice, she was just in steady, steady, steady decline. Okay, let's fast forward to October 23rd, 2024. That's the day the wheels completely came off my life personally. Just a life-changing, incredible day in my journey. That was the day that my wife went to the hospital in an ambulance due to a heart situation. It was difficult. It was brutal, really, really tough. And that happened October 23rd, and that sent us on quite a journey. October 21st, the very next day, my mother-in-law had her own health challenges, and that day she could no longer get herself out of bed. Up until that point, she'd been mobile. She was using a chair and maybe kind of using like a walker. And October 24th, she was too weak to get out of bed. So then we had to go over there. I had to go over there and like help her transfer from the chair to the, from the bed to the chair to the toilet to the front room. And you can't stand, you can't cook your meals. And it was created quite a care crisis where she needed a lot of care right now. And between those two things, my wife having just had a significant heart issue and my mother-in-law having a big decline in her health in just that 24-hour period, it changed my life. In fact, one of the things that greatly impacted was my professional journey. That's a story for another time. I'll probably tell that story maybe, I don't know, maybe a year from now, maybe summer of 2026, I'll tell that story. Lots to do between now and then, but it radically changed my life, as you can remember, as you can imagine. And the longer this situation went on, the heavier it became to me. At first, I was kind of shell shocked and could hardly function. But I tell you, by November, December, it was really brutal for me. I remember I was just eating Tums like they were candy. Just had so much acid in my stomach. A lot of it was just stress related. It was just it's been a brutal 9 months. Now, along the way, my mother-in-law's journey, she got to where she just wouldn't drink a whole martini, but she loved us coming over and having martinis with her. And so I went and I got her a special little martini glass. I don't know if you can see this. I'll put a picture up, but I got her this little martini glass, and I wouldn't fill it up very much, and she wouldn't drink very much, but it became really, really special to her and I that I would make her a martini, and her and I would have a martini. And once my wife had her heart issue, she wasn't having as many martinis, and so I would tease them, that I'm drinking for 3 now. But my mother would drink a little bit, and it just became very special part of our time together, having those martinis with her on Monday nights. So the month of November was really rough. From November, December, really rough for my mother-in-law. A lot of health challenges. We thought she was going to pass away 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. We did an early Thanksgiving. My wife's siblings came down. We all gathered, had a special meal, and I thought she was going to pass away. And so did my wife. As my wife has mentioned in one of her books, she used to be a nurse practitioner, and her specialty was hospice work. So she's seen hospice patients professionally, and I've done a lot of my time in the nonprofit world. I did a lot of care for people in hospice on the care side, and so we both were like, "Wow, we think this is it." And she didn't. She kind of by January, she kind of rebounded. Now, rebound in hospice is like not a lot, but she was able to like stand again and walk around just a little bit and push herself around in a wheelchair. And so that was a big mobility victory for her. The interesting thing is she didn't remember anything about Thanksgiving or Christmas or this. She just said that all of November, December was just a blur to her. And then eventually, so January kind of was a slight rebound for her. And eventually she ended up moving to the waterfront. They have a building down there, 65 plus, a wonderful building on the Vancouver waterfront. And one of the floors on that building is assisted living. She ended up moving down there. And that story is relevant in just a second, why it matters to me where she moved to. Meanwhile, as far as my wife's heart situation, we're meeting with the cardiologist, and is there surgery? Is there this? Is there that? And then in April, she had another significant heart incident. That's a story for another time. I don't know if she'll ever tell it or if we'll ever tell it. It was brutal for both of us. Very traumatic is not too strong a word. I guess the benefit, if you can say it, of that is all of a sudden now the medical community is like, oh, this is real. We got to do something. We have to do something right away. And so they got my wife scheduled for heart surgery on May 28th. Meanwhile, I'm going and seeing now my mother-in-law lives down the waterfront. We're no longer really having, martinis with her on Monday nights, but I go see her now almost every Wednesday. I take her groceries. I bring a pastry. I show up around 11:30. In the building she's in, there's 3 restaurants in the building. She's on the Vancouver waterfront, so there's a lot of restaurants right there. If you go down to the street level, a lot of restaurants there on the Vancouver waterfront. So depending on her energy, I'd bring her groceries and visit with her, or I'd bring her groceries. We'd have a cup of coffee and share the pastry that I brought. Sometimes she'd have lunch brought into her room, and we'd have lunch together if she had more strength. If she had even more strength, we'd go out to one of the restaurants in her building and have lunch there, and they'd overlook the water. And often, not always, but often, I'd take her in a wheelchair down to the lower level, and we'd go out and walk I'd push her along the Portland waterfront. There was a dogwood that was blooming, and she absolutely loved looking at that dogwood. And a number of times we'd go have lunch somewhere, have lunch somewhere special, Vancouver waterfront. And May 21 was really, really special lunch for me. It was a Wednesday. I took her down. We looked at the dogwood tree. We were walking along, and we saw this restaurant she wanted to go in. We went to Dos Salas. So I took her in the elevator. It's a second floor restaurant. We went up to the elevator. It was a beautiful, warm, sunny day. They took us out on the patio. And by then we had our whole drill down. She would have me order for her, and I knew it. She told me her order. And the server comes, and I said, well, the lady would like, and I order her a glass of wine, which she only just to drink a couple sips of, and I'd order her meal. And she would just hardly eat her meal. She'd take it home with you and then not eat it later. But it was the experience she loved. And I got her from her wheelchair to her chair, and she loved that. And she would just really, really enjoyed that meal. And I ordered for her, as I do. She was in different generations. She wanted the man to do the ordering. She's in her 80s. And at one point, she said, just thank you so much. You care for me like my husband used to. And that just meant the world to me, that we developed that kind of closeness and a relationship. And she was able to let me into her life enough to care for her. And she spent a good 20 minutes. I snuck a photo of her holding her glass of wine, just looking out over the Vancouver, the Columbia River and the boats on it and the people down below. And she just drank that experience in. That was May 21 on a Wednesday. The next week, Wednesday, May 28th, I could not go have lunch with her because that was the day my wife had her heart surgery. That was pretty intense. There's a lot of stuff that happened that day. That's a story for another time, but she did have heart surgery. And then eventually got her home. I'm caring for her. And that next Saturday, you have Wednesday the 20th, and that next Saturday, my mother-in-law, texted me. She needed me to come over. So I've been caring for my wife. She's got heart surgery, and there's two kinds of procedures you can have of her procedure. One is a 2 to 3 week recovery. The other is a 2 to 3 month recovery. And it turns out she had the one that had 2 to 3 month recovery. So she definitely needed some care, and it's going to take a while. And I say recovery, where you get back to having the kind of stamina and strength that you had before you had the surgery. So I get over to my mother-in-law's, and I find her on the bed, not in the bed, but on the bed in a fetal position, and her arms quivering and her legs quivering, and she's in terrible pain. And I think she's passing away right then. It turns out she'd gotten so weak and so close to the end that she was no longer regularly taking her medication. And some of her medication had time-release morphine, and morphine is great for pain relief. She had a lot of pain, given her physical condition, a lot of pain in her body. And she was in a pain crisis situation. So I'm pretty sure I knew what to do, but I called hospice anyways. Wasn't going to call my wife and say, hey, how can I care for your mom? Because even though she might know she would know the technical medical answers, she's recovering from heart surgery. That's the last thing she needs. I called hospice. Yep, I'm on the right track. I gave her morphine. She had some vials of morphine. I got her situated, spent a number of hours with her and got her situated, got her back on track, and made some changes with how she gets her medication. And that next week, we just don't see her. One of my wife's siblings came down and stayed for a week with my mother-in-law, and so I didn't have to worry about caring for her, and I could focus on my wife. And that following week, June 11th is a Wednesday, and maybe I'm going to go have lunch with her and take her some groceries or a pastry, whatever she was up for that day. My wife hadn't seen her mom since before her heart surgery on May 28th. And it seemed like her mom wasn't doing well the morning of the 10th. So we went over there midday on the 10th, and sure enough, her mom was not doing well. We cared for her, and by afternoon, it was clear this was it. And we ended up staying the night and caring for her mom. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, she was pretty much passing away. It was painful. It was difficult. She didn't eat or drink very much during that time. We gave her care, gave her medicine as best we could, gave her morphine. When I say medicine, I mean her morphine for pain management, and a couple other things that the hospice medicine they give you that help you with your passing. And I tell you, it was tough. It was painful because we've been caring for her for so long. And I'm talking about my journey. My wife just had heart surgery, and she's losing her mom, and so her grief is nothing compared to mine. But I'm telling my story, and she passed away that Saturday night, June 14th, late Saturday night. And there was things we had to deal with on Sunday morning. The funeral home, I don't know why they didn't have a 24-hour number, so it took a while to get hold of them to come take her away. I mean, I don't want to hurt anybody's heart, but when someone passes away, you got to deal with the body. And so finally they came, and I escorted her down, and they took her down through the service elevator and all the way to the car. And I just felt like I was just like escorting her all the way out, and they took her away. Then that next Monday so that was Saturday, she passed away. Sunday, we're dealing with that. Monday, we have to deal with some paperwork related to her passing through the funeral home. It was just an exhausting time, I have to tell you. And then one other wrinkle about that's fascinating is I lost my 17-year-old son, Zane, February 8th, 2016. And he was cremated and I had to go pick up his ashes. And as my wife's written about in one of her books, she lost her brother and her father in 2013, 3 weeks apart. And she was the one that had to go pick up their ashes. On June 23rd, my son Zach is going to get married, and he's asked me to officiate. It's a Monday evening, the wedding, and I get to officiate, which is an incredible honor to me that he and his wonderful wife, Molly, would want me to officiate their wedding. But about 1 o'clock, we get the call, the ashes are ready. We need to pick up her mom's ashes. And I told my wife, well, let me go with you. And so we went together because we both had to pick up ashes alone. So we went together and it was okay until they put the ashes there on the desk. And that was really rough. And I'm like, I got to hold it together. I got a wedding in like 4 hours for my son of all things. And I'll tell you that passing, all of that was rough. Just incredibly rough for me. And I have to be honest, I haven't even really processed my grieving. I've been busy. I've had tremendous amount going on. And it'll be in August, I will have some time. We're going to take some time off in August where I can really just process and do that grieving. But I have to tell you, that was one of the two huge challenges, was caring for mother-in-law in the last stages of her life. And her passing kind of brings that to a close in one sense. In other sense, now I have a lot of grieving to do. And I do want to end on a positive note. And the other struggle, as you've heard, that I was dealing with from October 23rd forward, just nine rough months, was my wife having a heart issue and eventually needing heart surgery. And she's now about 2 months into the 2 to 3 month recovery, and she's getting back to having the stamina and strength she had, and everything looks good for heart surgery. And so we're going to keep walking that out. So I'm super grateful for that. But I can't tell you how stressful and difficult and painful all that was. For a long time, it was hard in here, and just kind of like kept it blocked out because I felt like if I really owned how awful it was, I would just collapse. And again, now that we're going to take some time off in August, and now she's on the road to recovery, I think I'll finally have the ability and the energy to process all that. So like I said, we're going to take some time off in August. So I'm going to take a break. I'll put up a post on social media. Hey, taking the month of August off. See you in September. So if I don't do posts in August, maybe I'll come back the last week of August. We'll see. But if you don't see me until September, don't worry. I'm okay. We're going to take some time off. I just take a much needed break. But I super appreciate each and every one of you. Come September forward, I talked in my last video about those of you that want to, my front seat friends. A lot of you said, no, I want to ride shotgun. I call shotgun. I want to do that. And come September, I'll hopefully have more energy to get back to sharing my journey and give you fun things you can go along with me. I've had some fun adventures, even in spite of all this misery, in the month of July. I just don't have the capacity to post about them. I'll post about them, at the end of August and say, hey, here's some stuff I did in July. But I wanted to touch base with all of you, give you an update, and the two really heartaches that I've been dealing with for the past 9 months that I mentioned in my last video, my June update video, as you can see, they've come to an end. They've come to closure. And so now I have energy to work on the next steps in our journey, and both my wife and I do. So super excited about those. You'll be hearing about those in the future. Anyways, I love you all very much, and I will talk to you most likely again in September.